Hey, welcome. My name is Romain and I'm a senior solutions architect working for VMware. I'm here today to speak about NSX API, automation, and unicorns. So I will be honest, that was a trap to attract you to my session. I will only speak about NSX API and automation. So the usual disclaimer slide. So why automation? So we have multiple benefits coming from automation. It's consistent configuration. It avoids human errors. It accelerates workload deployment. The usual measured workload deployment, application deployment in enterprises are measured in days, weeks, even months sometimes. And you can choose to automate applications deployment, infrastructure deployment, or both together using VRA and NSX, for example, where you can deploy your application and the network security and load balancing assigned to it automatically. And NSX, about the automation of NSX. So you have the management plane, which is NSX Manager, on which is the NSX API. And technically, anything that can speak REST can help you to automate NSX. But there are many out-of-the-box integration that exist outside. So we have, of course, the VMware products with VRA, VRO, VCD, and VIO, which all has great integration with NSX. You have external cloud management platform, OpenStack, coming from different vendors. But you also have other tools, DevOps tools, languages where you can use to automate NSX, such as Ansible, PowerOnEssex, Python, curl, Chef, and so on. And before jumping into automation, if you want to play with API and if you want to troubleshoot API, I'm usually using a software called Postman, which is free and can be installed as a standalone or as a Chrome extension. And why Postman and not another solution? Because you can download a Postman collection based on the NSX YAML file, which is a file describing the NSX API. And then on the left, you will have all NSX requests coming in and automatically documented. And even better, you have variables described. You have body XML pre-populated. And if you have successfully requested an API, you can even generate code snippets in every language that you need to. So curl, PHP, Java, JavaScript, Go, Ruby, Perl, Python, you name it. So now, Ansible. We do have an NSX Ansible module, which is really great, and I'm using it a lot in my lab. So for people who doesn't know Ansible, so it's a tool that helps you to drive your infrastructure and your configuration to a desired state. And if you try to define Ansible in different keywords, so it's abstraction because you are separating the configuration from the logic. It's agentless because it's based on SSH. It's extensibility because you can install new modules. Idempotency, I will explain that later. And it's playbooks. So the playbooks are how Ansible is configuring. I have a bug here. Is NSX, how NSX Ansible is configuring your infrastructure. And it's based on the same NSX YAML file that I've mentioned before. And it's available on macOS and Linux. And it's useful, so it's not a 100% coverage of the NSX API, but it's useful for deployment, configuration of networking and switching routing, deployment of edges. But for example, it doesn't cover distributed firewall. So it's available on GitHub. Feel free to download it and to test it. So I mentioned idempotency. So usually when you don't know a word, first thing you go to Wikipedia. In that case, it's not really helpful because it's a mathematic definition. So for Ansible, an idempotent operation, the result of it is exactly the same if you repeat it once or multiple times. So it's like an elevator button. When you press the elevator button one time or multiple times, the result will be the same. So translated in Ansible, so if I have a playbook creating two logical switches, first time I execute it, the two logical switches will be created. Second time, nothing will happen because the logical switch already exists. That's the desired state. But if I manually delete a logical switch and I execute the script a third time, it will recreate the first logical switch and leave the second one untouched. That's idempotency, and this is one of the key features of Ansible. Then we have PowerOnEssex, which is very trendy nowadays. It's a PowerShell module that abstracts and translates NSX API into PowerShell functions. And it's available on Windows, but also on Linux and macOS using PowerShell core, or even with a Docker container. You require PowerShell 3 at least, and it's open source. If you have at least PowerShell 5, you can install it easily using PowerShell Gallery, doing install module -name PowerOnEssex, and you're all set. You don't have to download something. It will download it for you and install it automatically. And last week, when I checked, the PowerOnEssex had 273 functions included, and it's still growing. Again, it's not a 100% NSX API coverage, but it's close to. This one is really helpful to do advanced configuration, troubleshooting for distributed firewall, and so on. It's also on GitHub and open source. So it's open source, but it's not officially supported by VMware, so don't call GSS for a problem with that, but it's working well and it's working in production for many customers. And so we have all these tools. So we have automation tools, cloud management platform, DevOps tools, and so on. So which tools do you need? So let me introduce you my assistants. So it's Kevin, Stuart, and Bob's. So they have different roles in my company. One is VMware admin, the other is cloud admin, I have a security and a network admin, and so on. And so we have multiple tools. So I've mentioned many of them, and I've described 5 of them here. So PowerShell, Ansible, Viero, Viera. So which tool should they use? Technically, it's up to you. You can choose. You can choose one tool. You can combine tools. If it depends on how you are provisioning currently your workload, how the network team is working. Are they already using Ansible to configure their Cisco switches and so on? It also depends on your skills. If you already know PowerShell, stick with PowerShell. And finally, it's also depending on the requirements that you have, because some of the tools cannot do specific things. Like Ansible cannot configure the distributed firewall, but it's very powerful to get you to a functioning desired state of logical switching and routing. And so a few tips. So those tools have many examples on GitHub. So it's for Ansible and for PowerOnEssex, for example, you can deploy 3-tier application. You have a functioning environment using the example, but don't be limited by them. Invent your own use cases, maybe automatic documentation, maybe advanced distributed firewall troubleshooting, developer bubbles creation, or even the automatic recreation every day of your networking. Use the tools that you need, as I said in the previous slide, and combine tools. And most important for me, you should describe your infrastructure and separate it from the logic. So you should use, for example, I'm using a centralized configuration file, and I can attack it from different tools. More resources. Last week was released a free ebook in PDF, which is automating NSX for vSphere with PowerOnEssex, written by Anthony Burke, and it's free on internet, so you can download it. Also, if you didn't know it, the hands-on labs, the NSX ones, now they have already PowerOnEssex included and installed. So you can, if you're doing a lab, you can already use PowerOnEssex. And last one, go to GitHub, the github.com/VMware. They have hundreds of repositories. So we have the NSX RAML, the NSX Ansible, PowerOnEssex, Python NSX. I didn't spoke about it, but we do have a Python NSX model if you know Python and if you're familiar with Python, or if your teams are already using Python. They have examples also on GitHub. So that was it. No unicorns, but I hope that you enjoyed this talk as much as I enjoyed doing it. Thank you.